Boss Talk. My name is Jim Parker. This is my business partner, Carey Sobel.
Today's episode is titled Red Flags That Could Cost You Your Business Sale. And honestly, in my opinion, they're fairly logical red flags, but a lot of sellers don't understand them. And there are things that can be prevented if you do a little bit of research or have some forethought ahead of time. So remember, sellers, buyers are not going to look at your business the same way that you look at them. Buyers are looking for risk. Almost all of the red flags have to do with risk.
Absolutely.
And I think that the two biggest red flags that I'm going to bring up are both related to financials. So first one is that declining financial trends. Mm-hmm. When a buyer is looking to buy a business, probably the biggest red flag in the business is the business going like this financially. A business exists to create profit.
It's like, how far is that going to go down?
Yeah. How far is it going to go down? Is it top line or bottom line slipping? Sometimes you see top line numbers that are going up, and then you see bottom numbers at the same time that are going down. So the numbers always tell the story of the business, at least from an outside perspective. And then when you get some of the qualitative research, you can figure it out too. But if buyers feel that a business will continue to decline, they're out. It's the number one red flag, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Unless there's a really, really good story about it. You know,
sure.
Like I've got one for sale right now. The numbers decline over
how many years?
Over the last about year, almost 2 years now. But the gentleman, super nice guy. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he's had to go through 2 cancer treatments. So, when you can tell that obviously he's not going to get as much in value, or he didn't get as much in value because we're closing in a couple of weeks. He's not getting as much value as he would have 2 years ago, but it didn't scare buyers because of the unfortunate story. It's a true story, but he went through 2 cancer treatments. And so buyers are like, okay, that makes sense. And his numbers are still really, really strong. For him going through 2 cancer treatments. And actually the buyer that's buying it looked at it and said, my gosh, the fact that he was able to take that much time off and the business was still able to run as well as it did, it was kind of a plus. But usually, you see those numbers declining. Like our previous episode, we were talking about burnout.
Yeah.
It was declining because of burnout. Yeah. Buyers are like, how far is that going to go down?
Before you mention the second part of that, my head was going towards a topic that we'll talk about later, but let's do it now.
I always do that to you, don't I?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, keeping you on your toes.
So first of all, incredibly unfortunate to hear about the seller.
He's fine now. He went through a second cancer treatment. He's good.
Good. So if that seller's business, the numbers were going down because the seller was less involved, doesn't that mean that the business is very reliant upon the owner?
Well, it went down, but it didn't go down extraordinary. I mean, the fact that his business was off maybe, I don't know, I can't remember, 7 or 8% 2 years in a row. Each year it was down like 7 or 8%. So it was down enough where, it makes buyers, well, what's going on? How far is that going to go down? What's going on behind there? But not enough where I think that's pretty impressive for a small business owner to be in a situation when you're dropping 7 or 8% a year for 2 years and you're battling, something like cancer. I think it says a lot about the employees and the ability for the business to run.
Sure.
Pretty good without them.
So a really good example of why it's not, all these things are not infinitely 100%.
Yeah. You know what? I know where you're going with that. Because if numbers had dropped 50%, it would have been like, okay, like the business is him,
Well, the other part related to financials is just financial inaccuracies, right? When you're matching up a P&L to a tax return and they don't make sense, or a balance sheet and maybe the way you count your, if there are financial inaccuracies and discrepancies, it is a huge red flag. There's only been one time in the history of me doing business brokerage where somebody had actually falsified tax returns.
Oh my gosh, that's happened to me twice in my career.
Really?
Yep. Caught it both times, but both times. There are 2 times that happened in my career. 25 years, I guess it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And thank God the businesses didn't sell.
And that's the biggest red flag.
We caught it before.
When there's inaccuracies in financial reporting, that's probably the deepest red flag. But the other red flags are counting ad backs that shouldn't be ad backs, right? Or
being too aggressive on the ad backs.
Yep. And buyers and lenders both want clean, verifiable numbers. So when there is a discrepancy or there are not clean, verifiable numbers, in my opinion, it's the number one red flag in buying a business. Number one. Yeah.
That's probably the number one thing they need to clean up.
Yeah.
Usually is get all those personal expenses out of there, report the cash.
So some other red flags, and I'm just going to bring up a bunch of examples in this episode and we'll talk about them. One
Yep.
is the business financeable? And is there a large amount of seller financing offered? What do those stories tell you?
What tell me? Well,
First one is the business financeable.
okay. That definitely has to be financeable. I mean, when I'm taking a business to the market, if that business is going to sell for, $750,000 to a few $1,000,000, when I do the broker's opinion of value, before I go back to the seller and give them the most probable selling price, I'm at least going to one lender, SBA lender, and I'm getting it pre-qualified for an SBA loan, because at that equity value range, the chances of the buyer getting an SBA loan is extremely high. I mean, we know that it's like 95%. So I want to make sure I have a bank on board, and I'm talking to the bank about the uglies and stuff, the obstacles that we'll have to overcome. I want to flush all that stuff out up front. Things that might scare the lender. Hey, I want you to know that now when you're doing this. Then I go to the seller with the most probable selling price, but it has to be financeable. And that goes back to what we were just saying. If you got too many personal expenses being run through the business, the bank might they're not going to accept those, so they're going to get rejected. Or, the seller is wanting to sell their business for more than it's worth.
From a financeable standpoint.
From a financial standpoint, that could hurt.
It's kind of a barometer for us. We use it to validate our valuations, and almost like, hey, would you loan on this dollar amount? That's kind of what we're saying to the banks. If a bank just says outright no, well, if I'm a buyer, I don't think I'm buying that business unless it is a strategic acquisition. If I'm a financial buyer and a business is not financeable within the range of financing, I'm probably not buying it.
Right.
And I think that, so I had a deal, literally, I think it was last week. I sent a deal over to SBA for them to validate it. I gave them all the scaries and uglies like you talked about, and they gave me a pre-qualification.
They're going to find out anyways, right?
Yeah, but they gave me a pre-qualification letter with an asterisk, and it said, we will only approve this pre-qual and financing for somebody that is already in the industry, because it was such a specific niche type of business. So, there it is financeable, but it's a very small market, a very small pool. So if a business is not financeable, it's usually a red flag. Yeah. If a seller is willing to carry a very large seller's note, which we should probably quantify, is that a red flag to you?
If they're willing to carry owner financing, I don't think it's a red flag. I think that a lot of buyers look at that as a positive thing, that they're willing to carry owner financing, that the buyers look at it and go, the seller has faith in their business, the business is going to continue. However, my personal opinion about owner financing, and I know I'm going to cause an uproar in our industry, because we go to our conferences, and sometimes there's workshops on how to convince a seller to carry owner financing. How I look at owner financing is that I tell my sellers this up front. I want you to get all your money on the day of closing. And if we're in a situation where you have to carry owner financing, be happy with what you get on the day of closing, and everything else is gravy. I'm not a fan of owner financing. How buyers look at owner financing is that, the seller's going to have faith in the business is going to continue, that the seller still has skin in the game, that I can, I know the seller's going to be there if I need them. Well, you flip that around to the other side. If the seller's carrying that owner financing, they have no control. Like, once they sell that business, that buyer could drive that business into the ground. That has nothing to do with how good of the business was when they acquired the business. I've seen all kinds of weird things that not very often, but I've seen enough weird things in my career that buyers have done post-closing. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the seller's supposed to, be hurt because of that. I'm just not a big fan in seller financing. And I know that if there's brokers out there watching this, I'm probably going to get comments on there. Jim, you're crazy, blah, blah, blah. And buyers, I'm sure, are going to be like that too. But I am not a fan of owner financing.
So to you, it's not necessarily a red flag if there's a large amount of seller financing offered.
It is not. Is it for you?
Sometimes, yeah.
Why is that?
Well, for the exact reason.
Well, no, you know what? Before you say, I guess I never thought of it as a red flag, because I try to avoid the owner financing,
and I do too.
But I want to hear why, because I want teach me.
I almost tell every seller you're going to have to carry some type of paper, and it really is contingent upon the owner's involvement in the business. Yeah. I'm selling a business right now. Owners are completely absentee. Business is doing like 1.3 to 1.4 EBITDA completely absentee. There's no reason for them to hold a note. They should get paid 100% out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, will they probably have to because it's going to go through SBA? Yeah. When a seller is out.
Oh, wait. I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Are you talking about when you're carrying owner for a large amount of owner financing, the business is overpriced?
No, but
because you have to make up for that difference in the financing.
That is a good point. And,
Okay.
I think it's the case, but it's not where I was going with
I
it.
was looking for a gold star, but go ahead.
I just think if a seller is willing to just not get their money up front a substantial amount, there's probably an issue with the business. Because to your point, I do not think a seller should be required to hold a lot of owner financing if it's a good business. And when I say good business, it's not really reliant on that seller. There's not a huge risk of customer concentration. There's some management there. So if it's a good business, if that seller is willing to take 50% down, 60% down, maybe 70% down and leave the rest on there. Why?
Right.
Why are they not willing to get their money up front?
Well, you know what I hear from sellers sometimes is that, like, I talked to my CPA and they said that we shouldn't realize all that money in 1 year because we're going to get hit with taxes. If we
completely different ballgame.
If you can spread that over, a couple years, it's going to help from a tax consequence. And I always say the same thing. The CPA is trying to save them on taxes. I just take the other stance of, you can save money on taxes, but you're taking a large amount of money,
putting it at risk,
and you're putting it at risk.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather pay those taxes and secure that money and invest it in something else.
Same.
And plus, usually, what you're going to get as far as interest on an owner's note is going to be less than you're going to get in if you invested in mutual funds and you were getting 10, 11% return a year on average.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen every year, but on average, 10 or 11%. So,
I have a really good way to round this out.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a large amount of seller financing, it is a red indicator, maybe not a red flag, that you should look into the reason why that seller has agreed to do that. Is it because I believe in my business? Is it because I want to kick the can on tax? Is it because I have another venture that I need to go pursue and I need the working capital for it? There's a reason behind it. It at least is an indicator to find out the why.
Yeah.
Fair?
Fair enough. I agree with that.
So
sorry I didn't get a gold star in that one. I guessed a couple times.
I'll give you a gold star.
But it was still good information.
Silver star.
Okay.
More red flags that could cost your business sale. So this one's kind of loaded, but, and the way I wrote this is weird. Is the seller suspicious? So let's go a little deeper. What is the seller's motivation to sell? What is the seller's motivation in general? And what about the seller, right? So the red flag, is the seller a convict? Has the seller sold a business in this industry before? Is the seller pressuring you to close? Now, if all those things that I said were true and the seller is holding a lot of seller financing, that's a big red flag. Yeah. So it's everything about the seller, right? So when you ask a seller and look them in the eye, like one of the things that we always do, Jim, is in the way we bring a business to market, we always disclose the reason for sale.
Absolutely.
And we even
that's the number one question buyers are going to ask.
But we also have a video recording of the seller being interviewed talking about it. And on almost every single buyer seller call, if we get to it after all of that, buyer will still look seller in the eyes and say, why are you selling your business? Right. As they should.
They should.
Right.
They want to hear it. Even if they read it in the SIM, even though we say it to them, that's a question that they want to hear right from the seller, and justifiable. So,
So, it's like, I'm not saying to judge a book by a cover here when you're analyzing the person that you're looking to buy a business from, but you got to trust your gut a little bit. Like, do they come across authentic? Have you done your research on them? Are they telling you there's nothing wrong with my business? It's a great business. You should buy it.
Yep.
You're lying.
Yep.
There's something wrong with every business, right? So it's really just, can you trust the seller? So the red flag is, can you or can you not trust the seller?
I think that's a huge part. And there's two quick stories I want to talk about on that situation. One is recently, and I just told you this last week, I was talking to a business owner. It was a pretty good sized business, like I had a first conversation with him and it was kind of like, it was kind of offish. And I was like, okay, I don't want to judge anything on one call, but anyways, he sent over the financials and I was working on the ad backs, coming up with the broker's opinion of value. And, typically in that process, I have another call with the seller for about a half an hour, 45 minutes. And we go over the financials and I ask them questions. Well, I got on the phone call with him and I was excited about this business. It was a decent sized business. It looked like it was doing pretty well. that call went even worse. The guy was just rude. He was a jerk. I didn't trust what he was saying. And I just got uneasy. And I just said, I'm sorry. I don't think we're a good fit for each other. And I moved on. Because as a broker, I've been doing this a long time. I'm at that point in my career where I don't want to, every time I have to call up one of my sellers, I'm like, I don't want to call that guy. Oh my God. And I don't want to call him. Like, I don't want that. I want to have good relationships with my business owners where it's like, hey, how you doing, Tom? What's going on? Da, da, da. All right, great. And I want those kind of relationships. I'm at that age, and that point in my career. And the flip side of that is that if I'm not liking this person and I'm not trusting this person, is the buyer and the seller, or is the buyers going to like and trust this person?
Mhm.
And I'm a firm believer that you can have a good quality business and that buyer's going to come along and they're going to do their due diligence on the business. They're going to do a thorough due diligence on the business to make sure everything is truthful and accurate. But even though they do all that due diligence, they're still taking a leap of faith.
Mhm.
And when you're selling a house or you're selling a piece of commercial property, you could care less who the owner was. But when you're selling a business, I'm a firm believer that buyer's got to like and trust the seller. And I'm going to tell you my second story that reinforces that is I'm working on a transaction right now that is a franchise. We've had a lot of difficult time with this franchise throughout the entire process. It's been very, very
The franchisor?
very difficult time. The seller, fantastic guy. The buyer, fantastic guy. The franchise is a good franchise. It's a really strong franchise, but there's been a lot of problems with us getting this deal together. And, the seller and the buyer and me were on the phone the other day and they were both like, yeah, if it wasn't for you, seller, I'm not gonna say people's names, but if it wasn't for you, seller, and seller's like, if it wasn't for you, buyer, this deal would have fell apart a long time ago. But because they like and trust each other and all three of us have a good relationship, I think we're able to get that we're going to get that deal done because of that.
Yeah.
You know?
Likability, trust, the whole nine.
Yeah. Yeah. And if that didn't exist, I don't think this deal would have gotten as far as it has.
Yeah.
I think relationships is critical when you're selling a business.
One of the other red flags is turnover. So if I'm a buyer, I'm looking into the business, I'm asking questions of talk about the turnover of your staff.
Staff turnover? Yeah.
Talk about the turnover of ownership. Has it always been one owner? Was one partner bought out? Why?
Yeah. Has there been 3 owners in the last 5 years? That's a red flag. That's a big red flag. And I think the employee thing, you're absolutely right.
Turnover employees, turnover of vendors.
Yeah.
What if vendors don't want to work with you? I had a client who had one vendor and I said, well, why don't you de-risk and have a couple of vendors? And they go, they won't do business with me. They don't like my demands.
Yeah. And look, I've got a business that I just listed for sale. The gentleman just got rid of their service writer. And which is a key position in an auto repair shop, but it was justifiable. Like, sometimes somebody doesn't fit
Mm-hmm.
and they're not good. But when a buyer comes along and they're seeing that, you got a half a dozen, 10 employees in the business, nobody's been there longer than a year or two.
Yeah.
That's a red flag.
That's a red flag.
I mean, if a business owner is taking a business to the market, you've got a bad employee, get them out of there, get somebody new in there. It's going to help. The buyer's going to be thankful. Your business is going to be stronger, blah, 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 blah. But if you're seeing that major employee turnover all the time, there's a cultural issue in the business itself. And this goes beyond just, hey, the necessary people won't be there for the buyer to train them on how to do the different aspects of the business because they're still learning their own. I think it goes to a deeper problem that there's a cultural issue. There's probably things wrong with their systems and procedures and, just how the business is run in general.
And if there's a deeper cultural issue, chances are it's the current owner and seller that's the problem.
Yes.
So as the buyer, do they look at that as an opportunity to come in and make it better? Or do they look at it like, I don't even want to touch this, right?
Right.
Bottom line is it's a red flag. It's something to look into. It is something to pick up that rock and look underneath it, open up the hood. And I think that's the purpose of this. It's what are the things to look for that could be a bigger problem now.
And you do the employees too. If you look at an old employee's only been there for a year or two, you're also not flushing out because you know how it is. I mean, you've been a business owner multiple times. I've been a business multiple times. The people out there, they've been business owner for years. You're looking at that situation. They've been there for a year or two. When you hire people that there's a certain percentage of employees that will only work there for a year or two. They're the kind of employees that just move on
Journeyman.
quicker. Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas when you look at the employees, and you got, Sally that's been there for 15 years and John that's been there for 25 years. And then you got an employee that's been there for 2 years and, some other employees in between. It's like, okay, good. But you look at all 1 or 2, you start looking at it as a buyer going, how many of these employees are going to stay?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because, nobody has a lot of time.
Yep. A lot of different things
Investing.
on turnover.
Yeah.
So the next two, I'm going to use terminology from something so John Warlow wrote a book called Built to Sell.
Mhm.
Great book. And he then came out with a whole program called the Value Builder System.
Mhm.
And then you could be a certified value builder advisor, which I am. And I went through that program. And they pretty much take a bunch of the stuff that we do as business brokers and M&A advisors, and they put some titles and some sexy names on them. So I'm going to refer to them with the sexy names.
Okay,
as we
but
go
just
through
as
it.
long as you give me
I
what
will.
they really mean to me.
Well, I'm curious without you looking at the notes. So if I say Switzerland structure,
Switzerland structure. I don't know. It just sounds like, I don't know, a lot of chocolate in Switzerland. I don't know.
so Switzerland's, the concept of Switzerland is they try to just kind of like be in the middle, right?
Yep. Okay.
So
I was coming with chocolate. It was the first thing that came to my mind when you said Switzerland.
it's about being over concentrated. It's related to being over concentrated. So
Okay.
like, do you have one customer that is perhaps dominating your revenue?
Oh, yes.
Do you
Yeah.
have one vendor that is your only supplier?
So client concentration, client concentration, and vendor concentration, huge issue.
Yeah,
That's a
they're-
huge issue
it's-
when you're selling your business.
and honestly, it's one of the key questions I ask on the front end,
Oh,
like
me too. First
almost
call.
in the first call. Yeah,
Yep,
first
yep,
call, right?
yep.
So, how well does your business do? Blah blah blah.
Biggest
blah.
client, what percentage of the revenue do they make up? Yep,
Exactly. So
absolutely.
I think customer concentration in it has to be one of the biggest red flags and one of the biggest questions to ask. And it's all dependent on the amount of revenue and the business model and the industry and whatnot. But do you give a particular number that you say, if any client makes up more than X% of your revenue, it's a red flag? What number would you use?
Okay, so I'm gonna use, like, I prefer, and I think buyers prefer, anything less than 10%. I would really want it to be less than 5%, but at 10%, I'm like, okay, we're still good. When we start talking 15, 20%, I'm not saying it's not sellable. I'm just saying, okay, now we're going to have we're going to have an obstacle that we're going to have to overcome with buyers. And let's have a deeper conversation, like how long you've been with these people, what does the contract look like, blah, blah, blah. When you start getting up to really high numbers, like 50%, 75%, I'm going to tell you the truth. I know some great brokers out there that have taken on those deals and they've been able to close them. I personally don't take on listings that when you start talking about client concentration of 50 to 75%, but it doesn't mean it's not sellable. It's just becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah,
for
I
a
agree
buyer
with
to
that.
swallow that kind of pill.
I usually
And I'm going to say real quick. I mean, the reason I don't take it on is because the way I run, you know this, the way I run my process, it's very, very expensive. So every one that I don't sell, it is a lot. It's not just time; it's a lot of money out of my pocket. I mean, I put a lot of money into selling my listings.
Yeah.
So I have to look at it from a business standpoint and go, do I want to risk that kind of money? But if somebody's out there listening to this, it doesn't mean your business is unsellable, but you're getting to that point. You're quickly.
I think
It's going to be very, very, very hard to sell.
I would prefer to see no more than 10%. I think 15 doesn't even scare me depending on the size of the business. But again, if you're talking,
15's not bad.
You're talking about a business doing $1 million in revenue and one client's making up 15% of it. And then the rest are 10% or under. That doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah. And
Not the slightest bit.
another situation, like you could be talking about, a landscaper that last year, now let's say they made, they did 3 million in revenue last year. And last year they did a project for $750,000. As long as they are doing around 3 million the year before, they're on track to do that this year or more. That's a one-off. You know what I mean? So like when you're talking about landscapers or the construction business, you might have client A last year might have been your number one client. And they did this. And then this year that client A is now
That's a
in seventh
completely
place.
different ballgame.
And last year's 10th client is now the number one client. And it goes every year. That's a totally different situation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about that client that is making up a large part of the revenue in and year out.
I just sold a business that was doing anywhere between, I think it was 65 and 75% of the business's revenue. But it was every year since the business existed. And it was 30 plus years old. Been through multiple different procurement officers, been through multiple different acquisitions, this client.
Yeah.
So when we sold, we didn't necessarily discount the value, but we took it into consideration when we put a value on it.
Right.
But yeah, like you can sell businesses that have that high concentration.
You'd rather not, though. I mean, if you're planning your exit, like we were talking, we had the episode before this, we were talking about exit strategies and how important it is to plan for exits. I mean, if you're planning to exit in 3 or 4 years from now, you know, what I would tell a seller that has high client concentration is don't fire your biggest client. I'm not saying that, but
work on it.
As you grow, don't keep taking more and more work from them. Try to go out and procure more work so that percentage, you know, decreases.
I just brought a business to market 2 weeks ago, and the owner of the business started talking to me maybe 7 months ago. I said, here's your biggest issue. It's your referral source, which was a large piece of his revenue. I think it was like 80%. And when we were doing our seller interview on camera in this room, he told me that since the time that I had that conversation to when we were sitting there, he now brought it down to about his biggest is 30%.
Oh,
went from
awesome.
90 to 30.
Fantastic.
And, you know, we actually had to re-edit the film and the sim talking about that. Like that's how aggressive he got on it. So it's doable.
Hey, Carey, I want to hear the next, you have me guess the next.
Okay.
Neat little term you have there.
All right. So
I want to win that gold star.
This one is again from Value Builder and Built to Sell, but the hub and spoke issue.
They got some really fun terms there. Hub and spoke. All right. Let me think. Gosh, I have no idea. It sounds like a bicycle. Let me see if it's a bicycle. Hub and spoke. Hub and spoke. Keeps it together. I don't know. I have no idea, Carey.
It's owner dependency.
Owner dependency. Okay. Well, they're getting fancy.
I was thinking like ball and chain, but hub and spoke works too.
Yeah.
So the business cannot run.
I see that connection between the two, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
So business cannot run without the seller. Just flat out can't.
Oh, yeah. That's
huge red flag is when you ask the seller and you go, hey, so what do you do for the business? How many hours? Oh man, I work so much. I do this and this and this and this. And they're sitting there going like, I'm super important. And I go, that sucks.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's something that I always thought was weird is, and I used to do this in my first business. I used to work 110, 120 hours a week. And I wore that as a badge of honor. Like I'm putting in the sweat equity and I'm doing this, and I glamorized it. But, you know, now that I'm getting older, I look at that, you know, that amount of hours. I'm like, that's, first of all, it's completely unnecessary. Two, I think it's a reflection that you're not running your business properly. You know,
it's not a business. You are the business.
You're not delegating. You're not being a good business owner if you're working that many hours.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't wear it as a badge of honor.
Yep.
But yeah, that's really difficult when you go to sell. First of all, before we get into them being the business owners working that many hours, what buyer wants to buy a business for $500,000, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it is, and have to work 80 hours a week?
You're buying a shitty job.
Yeah. I mean, they want a business. Hey, maybe the guy's working 20 hours in the business, and now they look at it and go, okay, I'm going to work 20 hours in the business, and then I can work another 20, 30 hours on the business. But when you say you have to work 80 hours a week just to maintain the business,
that's a problem.
Nobody wants to do that.
It's a big red flag.
Yeah. And that's not even going into the whole, you know, owner dependency situation. So let's talk about owner dependency. I
mean, it's just simple. Like, and I think we can go industry to industry and relate to how it is involved. But I think one of the things, aside from the owner working so many hours in the business and having so many different like responsibilities, if you will, one of the things that I see being a really big challenge is maybe the owner isn't really involved in the day-to-day operational aspect of the business, but the owner of the business holds all the relationships.
Yes.
See that too often, right? So the concern is not that the seller or the buyer is going to come in and have to work so many hours or do so many things or find replacements. It's how am I going to transition those relationships from the seller to me?
Well, you know, I like when I'm talking to a business owner and you know, hey, you know, when you get a sales call come in or a customer or client call you, you know, like repeated clients, you know, who handles that? Or, you know, who does the interaction with your customer client base? I want to hear, and the reason I want to hear it, because this is what buyers want to hear, is I don't talk to them.
Mhm.
My staff does.
Yep.
That's what you want to hear. You want to be like,
Absolutely.
hey, yeah, they all call me. They're dependent on me. I've got the relationships, and it's me that built this business. It's me. And again, they're wearing, a lot of times business owners wear that as a look at me type of a situation, but that's going to come back and bite you when you go to sell your business. So start getting that so that
Absolutely.
that's flowing through your business.
And it's a big negotiation point as it relates to our earlier conversation around seller financing, right? So seller is selling their business. I had a guy that called me up and we were talking, I didn't end up listing it, but he goes, I'm willing to hold a significant seller's note because I know all the relationships with my customers are with me.
Mm-hmm.
Great job for you being cognizant enough to notice that. But is a buyer really going to want to take that risk? You're de-risking by not putting all of that money up front. And I had suggested, well, maybe we do some type of retention payout or earnout that so long as those customers stay for X, Y, and Z time, then you release X, Y, and Z payments. I don't want to do that. I want a guaranteed seller's note over X amount of time with interest. And I'm willing to do that because of these relationships. I go, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, a business that is super dependent on the owner of the business is less valuable. Again, referred to as hub and spoke in John Warlow's whole program. But one of the things that we typically ask, aside from customer concentration, is what is your involvement in the business, Mrs. Owner, Mr. Owner? And we look at a business being more or less valuable. Buyers look at businesses as having a red flag the more that the owner is involved in it.
I think the business owner has to ask themselves this question. Are their customers or clients coming to them because of them or because of the business?
Yeah.
You want them to be coming because of the business.
Yep.
If they're coming because of you, chances are you don't really have a business.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming because of the business, you have a business.
Perfect.
That simple.
Perfect way to put the cherry on top of it.
All right, let's get the next. You have another one? Fun word for me?
No more fun ones.
I'm disappointed. I'm not going to get my gold star, Carey.
Yeah. Well, relative to hub and spoke or owner dependency, what about lack of systems and documentation, right? So I think buyers want to stay away from risk and they love sustainability and continuity, right?
Mm-hmm.
What better way to have sustainability and continuity for having nice documented SOPs and systems in place that make the business less reliant, not only upon the owner, but upon the people there.
The employees.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to have proprietary processes. It's not hard to have proprietary systems necessarily, but nonetheless, I think that the more repeatable that the business is from, it could go down to repeatability of customers coming back, right? How desirable is your product? Is it a one-time purchase? All the way down to how do you deliver the widget? Is it because John, who's worked the line, has produced that widget for the past 15 years and shit, the days where John doesn't come in, those widgets aren't built as good as they could be, right? Or is it the process or the system that ensures that that widget is being built the right way?
Yeah, Carey, how I feel about the systems and processes, and one of the reasons why I love working with you and love being your business partner is because you and I share that same concept of how important systems and processes are in a business.
Yeah.
I mean, ever since we became partners, we've revised our systems and processes. We're trying to get them better and better and better. We're working on right now, taking up an enormous amount of time, but it's an important thing to do because you put that time in, and it's like, oh my gosh, we got to work on this, and it's not the most exciting thing in the world.
No.
But the end result is, hey, you got a better business. Things are flowing better. The employees know what they're doing better. It's easier to put another employee in there, into a position, or as you grow, it's easier to hire somebody and have two people in that position, whatever it is. And everybody's more on the same page. And the whole process just runs smoother. The customers and the clients may not know at the end of the day that you got strong systems and processes, or they don't think about it, but the way you're able to service them, they see that. Mm-hmm. So, we're on the same page. We love systems and processes, but, the reality is that most of the small business owners that we work with do not have documented systems and processes. I don't think it necessarily hurts the value of the business, but I think that if you have really strong systems and processes in place and you have them written down and you're actually looking at them, not just creating them and throwing them in some folder somewhere, that it adds more value. Yeah. It may not subtract from the value, but I think because most business owners don't have it.
Yep.
But I think it adds value to it, and it makes it more something buyers want more.
Even if they're not documented, think about the fact of, everything being in the owner's head. And if a key employee leaves and there's nothing documented, like that's where I think it could devalue for something. You don't necessarily need to have
every little thing written down.
Yeah, but you should have some redundancies, right? Like if John, the guy example that I gave that's working the line, there better be 2 or 3 other Johns that are ready to come back in.
Cross training. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, Carey, my first business, we built it was a pretty decent sized business. We had 3 offices around the country. I was pretty young at the time. So, we had done pretty well, but at the same time, we hadn't done very well. And the reason why we hadn't done very well is we had built a really poor foundation for the business. We had built this pretty big business on a foundation that was cracked. So like when a problem arose, whether it was with a customer, a supplier, or a vendor, or an employee, we would take care of that problem, make the customer happy or make, the employee happy. We would take care of it. But we put Band-Aids on stuff instead of going in there and saying, okay, what can we change that in how we do things so that problem never happens again?
Yeah.
We didn't do that. We just kind of Band-Aid on it, moved on. And so after years of doing that, we had a company that was from the outside looked, very successful, but inside we're like running around with our heads cut off all the time, like trying to keep things together because we kept having the same problems, like little fires, nothing big. But you have all these little fires you're putting away all the time. Whereas when you got the good systems and processes in place, and then when something does happen, because in this business, things are going to pop up. Something pops up and you're like, okay, let's fix that. Let's put a Band-Aid on that. Let's fix that. Let's overcome that. But let's dig in and create something so that problem doesn't happen again, or it minimizes that problem
the impact
happening again. And that's what I'm glad about Boss Group is when I started Boss Group, that's what I instilled into the team was, like Stephanie and Tara and everybody's, we've got a problem. Let's make sure that we fix that problem, but let's figure out what we can do now. Let's take a little time out, take a step back
to make sure it doesn't happen.
So it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that mindset is why I think for a large part, Boss Group runs smoothly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not saying that we don't have little things that come up here and there. I mean, every business does.
Yeah.
But.
Other red flags, legal and compliance issues. So this could be a big one. I think that
deal killer. Talk about a deal killer with legal. I mean, if there's a lawsuit going on,
lawsuits pending.
We can't sell it right now until you get past that lawsuit. You're suing somebody, they're suing you. From a business perspective,
can't close.
You're done. You're going to have to wait until that lawsuit is over before we do anything else.
And those risks could derail financing or kill a deal completely. Is licensing or IP ownership problems.
Oh, can I go back to lawsuits real quick? But I want to tell you, if there is no lawsuit currently, but you've had 10 lawsuits in the last 10 years, there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
So that's even though you might not have something going.
Yes.
Okay.
Zoning issues.
Yes.
Seen that happen quite a few times.
Make sure you're zoned properly.
And then related to that is also like agreement renewals, right? So leases. I see a lot of people who call us with a couple months left on a lease. They don't have a good relationship with their landlord. They're not going to get a renewal. And they're like, let's sell the business. I go, hey, dum, it doesn't work that way. This also is franchise agreements. Franchise agreements are renewed. Maybe they don't, one of the advantages of somebody selling a franchise is they've already paid the tag for the franchise fee. Well, if that franchise is coming up for renewal and the franchisor is not willing to renew it, what are they buying?
Right.
Yeah. Licensing, vendor relationships, equipment relationships, there's renewals and agreements and all of these things. So as you're going through, you want to see a business that maybe took the initiative to get these extended before listing it for sale, not trying to list it for sale with a couple years left or minimal time left.
Yeah, make sure you have enough time with them. And I want to talk about, I think licensing is a key one because we deal with that all the time. If you own a business that requires a specific type of a license, the whole thing you want to do is when you take the business to the market is you want to have the biggest possible buyer pool you can have. I mean, that's what's going to make your business the most sellable. It's going to make you get the best price, best terms, blah, blah, blah. You want that buyer pool to be the biggest. And, if you're dealing with if you're a business owner in a business where it requires a special license, if a new buyer has to come along and they have to have that license, and maybe it's a license that takes 2 years to get, you're really narrowing down the buyer pool.
Mhm.
Whereas if you can demonstrate to a seller or to a buyer that there's other alternatives on that business being qualifiable, if the seller's willing to hold the license there for a while, which the problem with that is the banks only want it to be there for a year.
12 months.
Yeah, 12 months that a previous owner can qualify that business for the new owner, which we're working on, by the way, IPBA. But the other thing is that, where else could they get that? Like, do you have an employee that would qualify from an experience standpoint that you can encourage them to go out and get the license themselves? You don't have to tell them that you're selling the business. Just say, hey, I think it'd be a good idea that we have
Safeguard.
a safeguard here in case something ever happened to me. We don't want to lose everything. Why don't you go out and get your license? If you get it, I'll give you X amount in bonus and I'll give you a bump in your raise. Or is there a third party out there that that could qualify the business with that license? So that when you take the business to the market, buyers going to say, hey, what's the licensing issues? I don't mind getting the license, but it's going to take me 2 years. There's a couple different alternatives.
Yep.
And if there's a couple different alternatives, it's going to make the buyers feel better and you're going to open up your buyer pool.
And you just don't want it to be a, oh shit moment at the end. These are the things that you want to ask in the beginning. These are the questions. I think every one of the red flags that we're bringing up today are questions buyers should be asking in the beginning and sellers should be answering before they go to market.
Yeah, that's the key. Before we go to the market, flush out all the work. When you're selling a business, all the hard work happens up front.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to tell you real quick I took a film class in college and it was really interesting. Alfred Hitchcock hated making movies. Did you know that?
You told me that before.
He hated, and the reason he hated making movies is because he felt like he was just going through the process.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind, he knew exactly what the movie was already going to look like. He had already played the movie through his head 100 times. So all he had to do was execute on film what he had in his mind. So he found it really, really boring.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do when we're selling businesses.
I know.
Do the work up front. Know what the process is going to look like. Dot the I's, cross the T's, do all the work up front. And then the process, you might still have some hiccups here and there, but you win or lose before you go to the market.
I completely agree with that.
I didn't know I told you the Alfred Hitchcock story.
Yep.
Okay.
I've actually used it again. Thank you.
Oh, did you?
Mm-hmm. A couple more red flags that could cost you your business sale. So competitor threats or negative industry changes. Pretty crappy reasons for people to want to sell their business. Somebody owns a shop that sells ice cream shop.
Okay.
Another ice cream shop opens on the other side of the street. Bigger, more exposure on the front. Maybe some new technology in the ice cream. I do all that weird stuff whatever. So
there's always every couple of years there's a new ice cream place coming along with some kind of
they do something different. But sellers sometimes decide to sell when their competition is starting to gain market share, or when a lot of retailers right now are wanting to sell because of the Amazon effect. So these are red flags that maybe are obvious, but they're still red flags. Mm-hmm. So I'm selling some nutritional shops right now. People are like, oh, I buy my nutrition now online. So why would I go into the stores? It's a good question, but business is still continuing to grow and have decent revenue. So it's like sometimes when an industry is shrinking and technological advancements are occurring, maybe that buyer is not aware of them. And that is actually one of the reasons why a seller wants to sell.
Oh no, my God. If that's the situation and you're a seller, you need to disclose to a buyer that there's a competitor. It's funny. I'm going to tell you the story. I sold an ice cream store years ago, and it was almost the same situation.
Oh, really?
I know you said ice cream. I was like, he had owned an independent ice cream store, and there was a new ice cream store, name brand franchise, that was going to be opening up down the road, like a block down the road. So, he's going to have this competition. He wasn't selling it because of that. This guy was funny because he had originally bought the ice cream shop because he worked a very stressful job and he made very good money, but it was very stressful. And he walked in one day to his local ice cream shop with his kids and he was getting ice cream. And he said to himself, my God, this is great. I would love to do this and be so stressed out. And he made a comment to the seller and the seller said, yeah, I'll sell it to you. So he bought the ice cream store because he was like, "Oh, sir, and make good money." He's like, "Yeah, I don't want all the stress." And then ice cream's doing ice cream. It was funny. He ended up wanting to sell like 10 years later for the exact opposite reason. He was so burned out. And he said, "I'm brain dead. I need something more challenging." And that's why he was going to sell. But anyways, he was selling the ice cream shop, and there was a new ice cream shop moving down the road. And I knew, because I talked to him a year before that, and he was thinking about selling, and I did a broker's opinion of value, but he wasn't quite ready. But then when he was actually ready, that store was opening up, but that was not the reason he was selling. And so we took it to the market, but we disclosed to all the buyers up front, even though that place, they hadn't even started the build out yet. The fact that the seller knew that that place was opening up, if he didn't disclose that to buyers, or if I didn't disclose that to buyers, you could be looking at a lawsuit post-closing, and you never want to sell a business and be looking over your shoulders. No. That's one reason you need a business broker. It's not just an instance like that, but any instance. But what we were able to do, because there had been so many of these chain type ice cream stores that had opened up and closed over the previous 5 years. And this ice cream shop, the guy that wanted to sell, had been in business for 20 years. So, it was like, hey, I mean, at that point, it's like, we've had this chain come in and go out, this chain come in and go out, this chain come and go out. We're not worried. It's cemented in the industry. But the important thing is disclosing it to a buyer.
Yes.
I'm telling a lot of long stories today,
They're great stories. This is
are they great enough? I'm going to get a gold star?
You already got your gold star.
Okay. All right.
Give you a platinum one.
Okay.
Other red flags: stagnation or lack of growth in investment. So outdated technology, equipment, not reinvesting in the future. I sold a printing business, and the buyer had the ability to come in and inspect the equipment, and they did. And they got an independent third-party appraiser. They got an independent third party to just look at the health of the equipment. All checked out, bought the business. 2 weeks into it, the most expensive machine that they had died. It's like almost $1 million machine, I think.
Wow.
So it's like, they're not necessarily hiding anything there, but they haven't reinvested into it. It was a very old school piece of printing equipment. And the whole business had been around. I think it was a third generation printing business over in Tampa. And they had just never reinvested in any capital expenditures. And, all of that was called out. It was there, but buyers still wanted to buy the business. But that is a red flag. Look at the equipment.
Yeah. It's probably a big ding on the price too. Big ding. You got to replace that equipment.
Yeah. Well, is the seller keeping up with new technology? Are they investing in new software? Are they investing in new hardware? Are they trying to grow? We talked about the growth versus non-growth, but this is more on, CapEx and whatnot. Are they keeping up with what they need to keep up with?
Let me tell you, I kind of I think equipment is kind of an odd thing, because when you value a business, and a lot of business owners don't understand this. They think you value a business, then you add the value of the equipment on top of that. You don't do that. You value the business and all the assets that are supposed to be included in that asking price. Because when you're comparing against other businesses that have sold, everything that you need to operate that business should be there operating.
Correct.
And with that being said, the equipment should be in good shape. The buyer shouldn't have to come in and spend a lot of money in CapEx as soon as they buy a business, to replace equipment. It should have a good life cycle left on the equipment. And it should be there and good shape and good quality. But on the flip side of that, if you're a year away from selling and you go spend $200,000 or $1 million on a piece of equipment, it's not going to add any value to your business either. So if you're down something like that, a big piece of equipment goes down, probably the best thing to do is not to buy that equipment brand new, but buy a good used piece of equipment, because you're not going to ever see that return on that.
Or value. You just get a new piece of equipment that has, a small down payment on it and a transferable note, something to where it's not a huge,
like a lease of some sort or something like that.
Just making sure that it's transferable.
That's a good approach too. And then it'll take a little hit off the seller's discretionary earnings of the EBITDA, because you got that extra expense in there. But it's probably better than buying a new. But I want to talk to you. I know you're going to move on, but I want to talk to you about you were talking about keeping up with software and technology and things like that. I have an opposite approach to you. And I'm working with a lot of the last several years. I'm working with a lot of business owners that are at that retirement age, and a lot of them, they don't have a website. They're using an AOL email address. I don't know about you, but I see an AOL email address. I'm like, yeah, you're talking. You're ancient.
You're a dinosaur.
From a business perspective, you're a dinosaur in a business perspective. And they haven't been keeping up with all the technology. I look at that as
an opportunity.
Buyers look at that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Look how much this guy is doing in revenue. Look how much this guy's making. And he's got no website. He hasn't been keeping on technology. We make minimal, because a lot of that software stuff is minimal investment on the scheme of things. There's a lot of growth opportunity there. Now, with that being said, I sell a lot of auto repair businesses. If you own an auto repair business and you're doing everything by paper and you don't have a database with your clients, like their name, their phone number, their email address, how many times they've been in the shop, why they're coming in the shop, the make, model, and year of their car, that's going to turn off a lot of buyers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So the basic technology needs to be there. They don't want you to have 4 boxes in the corner,
manila folders
with paper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get yourself some kind of CRM. But
yep.
Go ahead.
I just have one more point, and it's
one more. We're done already.
Yeah,
I'm having fun. Okay, this better be a good one.
I think this one's really fun.
Okay.
So, a red flag could be unrealistic seller expectations, and there's a lot underneath that one.
Yeah.
So, what I wrote was overpricing the business and refusing to accept market multiples. Sellers who insist that their number will scare off buyers before serious talks even actually begin.
Yeah.
Right. So. I had a seller before say, I'm not doing a familiarization period. I'm not offering any free time for a transition. Mm-hmm. Go, really? And I'm not signing a non-compete. Right. So some of these sellers, I mean, these are the types of sellers that we're kicking away, we're not wanting to work with. But for buyers out there that are looking for red flags, unrealistic seller expectations all across the board, at least the ones they can hear and see and read about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of them, the seller might just be between them and the broker, right?
Yeah.
But I think the more unwilling a seller is to bend or cooperate or negotiate, the more of a red flag it is.
It is. It's all kinds of weird things like, hey, my name's on the building. The name of my business is, got my last name in it. I don't want to sell that, because I don't want the new owner to screw up my name. To, hey, I don't want to sign a non-compete post-closing. I don't want to tie myself. Like, these are things. You're selling a business. Big part of what they're buying is the name of the business, which is the goodwill of the business. Is how your customer base knows. They also don't want you to go compete against them. So this goes beyond being reasonable about price, but being reasonable about through the whole process.
Yes.
And they need to put themselves in the buyer's shoes and how the buyer is going to be looking at this. And the buyers are going to be paying a lot of money for their business. The buyers need to be protected.
Yeah.
You keep mentioning, risk. The seller needs to do whatever they can to help reduce that risk for the buyer. That's how you're going to get transactions done. And I want to go one step further that, we're professionals. Business brokers are professionals. Your M&A advisor, they're a professional. You're hiring them not just to sell your business and do paperwork. You're hiring them for a large part for their advice.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a good broker, their advice is going to be golden.
Yep.
And you need to, I'm not saying you listen to every little thing they say, but you really need to listen to them and digest that information, just like you would digest that information from your CPA, your attorney, or your financial planner, because we're professionals at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we might not always tell you what you want to hear. Our job is not to tell you what you want to hear. Our job is to advise you on how to get the transaction done for your best interest.
If we told sellers what they wanted to hear, we would have a bunch of shit.
I would never sell anything.
Oh my God. Yeah. But, in summary, there are so many red flags that could come up that could be indicators of an actual problem or just something that you need to dive deeper into.
Right.
So today we scratched the surface on a lot of the red flags that buyers should be looking for when they're going to buy a business, and sellers, more importantly, when you are going to sell your business. These red flags that we're bringing up today could be the reasons why your business does not sell. And if you take our advice and listen to what we're saying, you could get ahead of the
call us early.
Yeah, call us early. Start the process.
A couple years
early.
before.
We appreciate you listening to Boss Talk. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.